Okay, what's up, y'all? I wanted to do another Dariacore tutorial before the end of this week, so this one's going to be a little more sound design focused. As you'll hear, it's not the most finished or polished project. There's not even a sidechain in it, so it's the same project from the last tutorial, just the next section of it, and it gets kind of glitchy and chopped up and fun, so I'll go ahead and play that so you know what you're getting into. Okay, so the first thing that I want to go into here is this is the only sound that I'm not going to do show the sound design for. I'll explain it a little bit, but it's this noise growl here that layers with that first hit of the vocal in the second section of this track. And that's just because I deleted the patches and after I rendered them to save space in this project file, it got to be too big. So just so you don't watch the whole thing and realize you didn't get the only noise you wanted, that's the only one I'm not going over. Okay, so running through my first section here, we have a little bit of a call and respond. And it is made up of 4 different patches, each playing different notes. If your piano roll doesn't look like this, hit Alt-V to turn on ghost channels, and you can even hit Control-Alt-V to turn on or off editable ghost channels. So I don't have to be in that particular instrument to change the notes that are in it. The first patch is going to be this Moombawek. Sounds like that. And so this is what the patch looks like. It's 2 oscillators, both set to Juno, which is in the analog folder. The LFO1 acts as an amp modulator. It's set to envelope mode so that it doesn't repeat. And then oscillator A on this most fundamental heavy, almost a square section of the wavetable. Oscillator B is pitched down only 1 octave instead of 3 like this one. And then it's up 7 semitones, making it a perfect 5th, I believe. I should actually look that up because I keep saying that. I'm pretty sure that's a perfect 5th up. And then it's got ring modulation turned on, which just gives it a little bit more grunginess and some of the harmonics that complement the first oscillator. So then we have our filter here, which is a comb high 6. The high pass turns off the comb for the low end, and only oscillator B is going through that. And so LFO4 here does 2 things. One is it moves that comb filter up and kind of just gives a little bit of movement to it. And then it also acts as a master tuning pitch drop. So really useful to make your sounds a little punchier. So you go in here, LFO4, set to the master tuning, turn on unipolar, and then I have it pitched way up, 70 units. So moving on from there, we have some 0 square distortion that's modulated by LFO2, set to a bar. So this one's quite a bit longer. And that just helps it be big and thick, so that this filter here only goes down to about the halfway by the time the note cuts off. And then we do have some dimension expander on it, and I use the envelope 1 to gate it, so we don't get that little tail in there. Right, you hear that? Versus this. So we're getting the benefits of the dimension expander minus the tail. And then we have an OTT where the low end is boosted more than any other band. And that's it for this one. Then our next layer is this grainy layer. And it is also a Serum patch. And all it is LFO1 on two square waves. One is a little bit of unison and some detuning to give it some width. And the rate is pretty high up. And then it just gates the note on and off like your standard ARP. Little high pass, a little bit of noise. And then I have a low pass filter on it to cut some of that harshness out. And then a chorus to add some width after the reverb, and then a compressor. And so I have this reverb, and what this reverb does here, and I'll explain it first and then turn it on, because once I play the note it won't stop. I have the size turned all the way up, and that makes the room so large that by the time the notes are getting to the actual reverb room size, it almost is kind of a delay, and it kind of sounds like a grain delay, so it's useful for making a granular sounding thing that's not really made with grains. It's not really granular at all, it's just a reverb. So if I play that, size all the way up, decay all the way down, low cut all the way off, high cut all the way on to cut the harshness out, spin all the way down. And so if I turn the reverb on, it sounds like this. And what's making it stay so loud like that is the OTT, the multiband compressor that's on it, because if you turn that off, it decays up a good bit quicker. So pretty simple little patch. And so the way I have that programmed out is the sub will play a note and the ARP will just play like a complementary like counter melody almost. So and as you can see here, the sub repeats that A, which does, you know, it wouldn't sound so different if I didn't have the counter melody playing a separate note there. So that's the call. Okay, so then for my response, I have these two patches that play together. One's called hit and the other one's more of a pluck. So they sound like this. And sometimes they're playing different complementary notes. Sometimes they're playing the same note. There's a little leading note here that kind of changes to fit the vocal chop that I have on top of it. So the first layer is this hit layer. For this first layer here, what I actually did was cloned my bass patch. As you can see, they're nearly identical. And then just did a couple of modifications to it. So I turned the oscillator A way down. I changed the shape of the amplitude pluck LFO to be a little bit, it ends quicker and doesn't sustain the whole way. Then I changed the filter LFO to be more plucky and less sustainy. And then I also changed my master tuning thing is way faster. As you can see there, it's really just popping it real quick. And then my filter's a comb filter. There's a lot more width on oscillator B, tons less volume on oscillator A. The sub is used in this one, but it doesn't go through this comb filter here. There's noise that's introduced in this one. And this, you know, wasn't a scientific, like, I'm going to do this and this and this. I just kind of took the patch and tried to make it different really quickly, which is, I think, the best way to make your sounds. In the past, I've tried to be like as precise and methodical as I can making music, and that's just so much less fun, in my opinion. I don't even think the results are better doing that. So, then I changed the clipping to soft clipping, which is a little less harsh. Dimension expander's still the same, getting gated by envelope 1. And then, as you can see here, my LFO2 is a lot pluckier, but not too plucky. I wanted it to be a little bit of a hit because my other one's a lot pluckier. So then going into my post effects here, if you made that patch, it would sound like that. So then I put an OTT on it, just kind of gluing it together, raising the volume on it. And then I put a EQ, cutting out that sub that I introduced, but I still get the harmonics from the higher end of the square, and then a compressor. So not too technical there, but you know, some decent results, I think. And then this is the other patch, and it acts kind of as a sub for this section because the other one gets high cut, high passed, low cut, I guess, not low passed. And so this one is a lead that I modified into a pluck. So as you can see here, I have the sub oscillators kind of on a little bit. The oscillator A is playing that root note square with some heavy unison, a little bit of width. And then oscillator B is playing a synced up three sync units, 3 even units, which is a perfect fifth again. It would be the same as doing this if you do that sync like that. And so this one is acting as kind of like a tonal layer, adding some richness. There's some noise in here. There's a little bit of the sub square. So then I have a filter. That's the distortion low pass, which just is a lot more tonal than a regular. Right, as you can see, it's quite a bit more tonal and sharp than the other regular low pass filters. Then I have a multi-band compressor gluing it together a bit, and a high pass that I don't use in this part. Then going into the post effects here without any post effects, just a lot weaker. I have a wave shaper, bulking it up. Then a Serum effects, just adding a dimension expander. And then a snap heap that, okay, this looks like it does nothing, but there's a reason for it. I was going to do some delays and some unique stuff in here. I ended up not sticking with it, but the fact that these are all in parallel mode, it adds a bunch of gain, right? So that was, I didn't want to remove that and change it. I just felt like the quickest way is typically the best way in my workflow. So instead of trying to go in, dial the gain staging in correctly, just do what's the quickest is what I felt like worked there. So then that really slams it into the OTT, which makes it a truly strong and sharp pluck. So that's our 4 layers for this call and respond. So with all those pieces that I just showed, adding the vocal in really makes it what that makes this section unique in my opinion. So So when I wrote this section, I think what I had was the whole vocal just set out, and I wrote this piece kind of under it. And then I kind of felt like, you know what, the where it gets to this, I don't know if it was the vocal came first or the plucks came first, but I was like, oh, it would be cool if it just kind of stuttered there with my pluck. So then I was, you know, I felt that each section had a pretty strong starting piece to the verse, right? So I cut out the first bit there. And then for this section, they don't really line up, because like the first part where the chop happens, I instead moved this piece, right, into the chop. So it is kind of broken up and made quite a bit different. So, you know, just to accent the what I had with the synths going right there. So then going into my next section here, I dropped the pitch on the vocals down. I really liked how this lower octave of the break-in verse sounded. And the first piece that I'll talk about is the noise growl, I guess. So in each first section right here, the ARP like made a weird kind of artifact, and you can really hear it right here better. It almost sounds like a little woof, woof, right? I don't know if you can hear that, but to me, I was like, oh, I want to make that, but a growl, much growlier. And so that's what made me want to make this layer here. And it's basically your standard saw harmonic heavy respace, something like this. Right, and you can get one of these. I'm going to just super quickly run through this. You can get one of these by running a saw with heavy unison. I also use the single cycle gnarl from Virtual Riot's wavetable pack. That's not really that necessary for this. And then just added a bunch of noise to it, right? And see, we're kind of getting into what it is there. And then just ran it through some saturation and a compressor. And then with a lot of fine tuning, I ended up with the other one. I think I also did vocoding. And that one's a little bit more tonal, and it's obviously a much slower growl, but maybe I'll try and recreate that or do a different version of it in a later tutorial. But that's what kind of inspired that section. So I'm gonna go ahead and turn that off since, oh, also, it plays notes that complement the section. Right, so keeping things moving, there's a lot of different melodies and counter melodies going on in this area. So I'll keep my vocal off and show what's new here. And so the first thing that's new outside of the noise growl is the sub changes, right, to this resub. And all it is without the processing, a respace that I made, kind of, you know, just picking a sample that sounded a little bit aggressive, turned on my volume envelope, also turned on a pitch drop. As you can see, the pitch drops pretty quickly right there. And then ran it through an OTT and then cut that top end out of it. Right, so just trying to get a nice clean sub to layer with my with my noise growl. So then the plucks stay the same here. So as you can see, it's the exact same pattern, except for the last section is omitted from the first half here. Right, as you can see, they're not similar. They're the exact same, just with the final section. Because I didn't chop the vocal right here, I didn't want to put the chop underneath it. It doesn't sound as good with it. So then the other thing that kind of makes this section an increase in intensity is there's a sub layered underneath my pluck. So when I go and finish this track, what I'm going to do is cut the highs, cut the lows out of the plucks, and they'll be like a bigger, thicker pluck, right? I won't have lows in this section. Or I might just have really weak lows, and then when the sub comes in with the drums, it'll add a bunch of intensity to this that makes it a much more full section. And the vocals are extended out a little bit longer here than they are in the first section, right? I keep... Then my chops, as you could hear, you see we got the dark blue and the light blue. I mixed those together to have one chop of each to just complement this and add complexity, make it cool sounding. Yeah, and that's going to be it for this one, y'all. I know it's a little bit messy of a tutorial, but I wanted to get one out this week and not wait until next week. So hopefully you learned something. Hopefully you got some tricks that you can use in your own projects. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.